I'm Andrea Isabel Lucas, founder of Bar and Soul and author of Own It All. The Own It All podcast is all about how to stop waiting for change and start creating it. I interview inspiring folks and leading thinkers who share tips on how to make a difference in your life and the world around us. Listen in each week to harness your power, maximize your time, manage boundaries, rock your career, health, relationships, and be an ally for causes that matter. We'll help accelerate all you're capable of doing with practical advice, stories, and strategies. Get ready to own it all because your life belongs to you. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Own It All podcast. I am very excited to introduce you to our guest today, Paula Rizzo. She's an Emmy award-winning television producer, best-selling author, and a media trainer and strategist. As a former senior health producer for Fox News Channel, for more than a decade, she produced segments with a range of top experts, including J.J. Virgin, Jillian Michaels, and Deepak Chopra. A media veteran for nearly 20 years, she also worked in local news in New York City as a producer for WCBS, WPIX, and WLNY. She coaches experts and executives to perform better on camera and produce their own videos. She's the founder of listproducer.com, and author of Listful Thinking, Using Lists to Be More Productive, Highly Successful, and Less Stressed, and Listful Living, a list-making journey to a less stressed you. She's also co-creator of Lights Camera Expert, an online course geared toward helping entrepreneurs, authors, and experts get media attention. She's been featured in a ton of media outlets like foxnews.com, Business Insider. She contributes to mindbodygreen.com, entrepreneur.com. She's been on oprah.com. So many very cool accomplishments in the media. And yeah, we're going to have a chat today. I'm very excited to welcome you, Paula.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, me too. There's so many things that I want to ask you about and that I'm excited to learn more about. But first and foremost, I wanted to talk to you about your books and about list making in general. Obviously, you're very passionate about it. You're publishing now your second book on the topic. So I am curious, can you tell us more about your books and also what prompted you to write them?
Yes, I'm crazy about lists, obviously. Not one, but two books. Well, I always wanted to write a book. I never thought it would be about list making, but here I am. As a television producer for many years, I used lists to be really efficient and really get stuff done. And I noticed that I wasn't doing the same thing when it came to my home life. I was kind of a mess. I was forgetting things. I wasn't as organized. And I was like, that's not who I am. So I started using some of the list making techniques I was using at work to keep focused and stay in line at home. And I just noticed it was a huge change for me. And I ended up starting listproducer.com because I had a very wise friend who said, don't write a book, start a blog, see if you're even interested in this. I thought, okay, that's a good idea. Let me do that first. So I did that first. And then it turned out that there was a lot of people who were really either loved lists and were really interested in it, or people who lists had failed and they thought like, oh, that doesn't work for me. And so I was like, you know what, there's some really successful people out there who use lists, who are top of their game. And it's no coincidence. So I started digging in deeper into that. And then I had Listful Thinking was my first book, which is very much the 101 on list making. And then the second book is Listful Living, which is a journal that is designed to help you create a life that's less stressed out and that you're able to be productive, but you don't have to, burn the candle at both ends.
That's fantastic because I have to say that those of us who get energized by talking about making lists, and I am definitely in that group of really type A people that are like, if you open any of my journals, there's more lists than there is like free writing going on in there. I can see how that might seem like a habit that could lead to overextending yourself or like getting carried away, having too many goals, having too many to-dos. So you keep coming back to the idea of less stressed. So I'm really interested in hearing how you use list making to lead to not to more overwhelm, more to-dos, more busyness, but instead less stress.
Yeah, it's really about what you leave off the list that matters almost as much as what you put on it. So really being able to prioritize and know like this has to happen today or it doesn't have to happen. Or I keep putting the same thing on my list and I never do it. Maybe I don't need to do it. Maybe I'm not the one who has to do it. So to really examine, how are you putting stress and anxiety on yourself by saying, oh, I should be doing this, or look, everybody else is doing it. So really to examine, and that's what this new book does, is really to examine where are you right now with your productivity and with your stress levels. And there's some journaling in there, and there's some exercises that are meant to really get you to just be a journalist. Look at it from the outside in and say, okay, what does it look like right now? And don't judge it. And then the second part of the book is really about, okay, if you could design your life in any way and you had, best case scenario for your schedule, best case scenario for how much you're getting done, what does that look like? And then the last part is really practical on how can you actually make those two things, come together a little bit more clearly.
So I want to back up for a minute and hear from you. Like you said that before you started doing this in your personal life, you were using it really successfully in your professional life. What did that look like for you as a TV producer?
Yes. So at the time I was working in live news, which is kind of crazy town. There's a lot of stuff going on all at the same time. And the news happens with or without you. It's going to happen at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. or whatever it is. And you need to have something ready to go. So being able to be super focused and using lists to say, okay, these are the 3 things that need to happen before the top of the hour when, this live shot is happening or whatever it is, it really makes you motivated to get things done really fast. You have to be deadline oriented, and you really have to it's good enough. And I think that's a problem that a lot of people fall into, that they'll just keep working on, the same blog post for a really long time, or they'll keep working on the same video for a long time, as opposed to just getting it out there. Like Seth Godin always says, ship it. That's his thing. Just can you get it out the door? Yeah. And so that my training as a TV producer really has helped me to, not be too connected to everything so much that I'm like pining over it before it goes out. It's like, this is good enough. Let's get moving on to the next thing.
Yes, that idea of done is better than perfect.
Exactly.
So how do you discipline yourself to stick with, because I'm with you on like, yeah, if it's not on the list, that's important because that really makes you focus on what is on the list, right? But how do you discipline yourself to stick with that list and not deviate from that and go chasing butterflies or doing other tasks that are more fun?
I know. And that's the thing. There's always something that's going to be more fun, more exciting. The way I look at it is to create that list as a roadmap and an intention for the day. And so if you create that list and you say, here's my intention for today. And that's why I like to do it as a daily list. Okay. Here's all the stuff that I know I have the time and the resources to do. So that's really important, because you don't want to put stuff on there that you're never going to get to, because then you're going to feel like a failure at the end of the day, right? So you're not going to put things like write book. You're never going to be able to write a book in one day. It just doesn't happen. So being able to create like smaller to-dos, what part of write book could you do today? So that's another big thing, is just to chunk out the task into actionable items that you can actually do.
Yeah, sometimes you have those list items that you keep rewriting again and again. And it's like, wait a minute, why am I not ever doing this thing? Is it because it's just unclear and it's not enough of like a baby step that I could actually do something about? If like start my book, what does that even mean? Does it mean do research? Does it mean write an outline? Does it mean just set a timer and make your fingers move on the keys? Like it could mean a lot of different things.
Yeah, it's not specific, and it doesn't set you into motion. So the other thing too is to also use action words when you're making your list. So you don't want to write things like mall. You want to write buy gift for grandma. Like be as super specific as you possibly can, because then that it allows your mind to just zone in and say, okay, that's what I need to do, versus leaving it open for interpretation. And then that means you go to the mall and you buy 12 things for yourself, and then you leave and you forget what you were supposed to be doing while you were there.
Right. That makes sense. So what lists, now that you do this in your professional and your personal life, what lists do you recommend? Are there like quarterly, monthly, weekly lists? Are there personal lists, health lists that are separate from your work to-dos? Like how do you organize that personally?
Yeah. So for sure you want to do the to-do list. That's the number one biggest one to do. And I would suggest doing it as a daily list and doing it the night before you leave your desk every night. Every night you sit down, you just make that list for the next day, and then you can hit the ground running the next day.
So you've got probably personal lists, health lists, like career goals. You've probably got long-term goals, short-term goals. How many actual lists are you working off of? And how many do you recommend that people have?
It's a lot of list making, right? But
Mhm.
the idea here is that these lists serve different purposes. So it's not just the to-do list. Of course, those are things you need to get done. And
Mhm.
then maybe you have a list of restaurants you want to go to. So things that you want to remember, books you want to read, the recipes you want to make. It's just that you want to clear out the space and the clutter in your mind so you don't have to remember anything.
Oh,
Use
right.
the list, put it on there and do that. But one of the things that I talk about in the new book, Listful Living, is really about creating lists of feelings. Like, how did you feel after you worked with that one client? Or how did you
Mm.
feel after you were on that vacation? Were you actually less stressed or were you more stressed? How do you
Mm.
feel when you're around that person? So really tapping in to what's going on with you. How stressed out do you feel in different environments, or that kind of thing. List making can be used for that as well. So it's not only about like to-dos and things like
Okay.
that. It's really, it can help to create a less stressful environment.
So it sounds like your new book probably has a lot of those different list making prompts to have you reflect on a variety of things. This isn't just about getting things done.
Exactly. It's a little bit, more about how do you design your life that
Wow.
is less stressed. And, the reason that it all really came about was because a year after my first book came out, my appendix burst.
Oh my God.
And that is very dramatic. It's a very dramatic way, a very dangerous way of your body telling you, hey, you're not listening to me, slow down a little bit here. And that really made me reframe everything in my life. I had to take everything off my list. I was in the hospital for 9 days. I was out of work for 6 weeks. It took me
Wow.
over a year to really recover. And so, you look then at the things that you're allowing onto your list and you're saying, why am I spreading myself so thin? None of this, half of this stuff doesn't even matter.
Mhm.
And so really being able to then choose what you put on, be really essential about it. Does this have to happen? Does it have to be done by me? It really changes the game when you look at it with a new eye.
What's a good place for people to start who are just new to this concept altogether?
Well, I think the first list I always tell people to make, the to-do list is always good, like the brain dump of all the things you need to do. But it's even more fun to create a bucket list or create a to become list, as I call it in my first book, because it's aspirational and it's something that you know yourself best. You know what you really want to do. You know what you really would like in your life. So why not do that? It doesn't feel like work. It's much more of a fun sort of activity to kind of put yourself out there and think, oh, what could I do if money was no object, if things, just throw it out there.
Love that. Yeah, dreaming is always good because it gets you out of the problem solving of what you can't do or all of that day-to-day stuff that we can get so swamped in, and it opens you back up to possibility and really getting back to thinking about what's possible rather than thinking about all the reasons why not.
Absolutely. Yes. It's a fun activity.
What do you find that people who you share this process with, what are some of the most common things that people just decide, I'm taking this off my list? When the hell did I ever agree to this? Why did I agree to this? Like I'm moving on from this.
Yeah, it's true. You tend to see that when the same thing pops up on the list over and over and over again, and you're like, what am I doing here? There was a woman who I actually interviewed on my blog years ago. Her name was Karen Rizzo. We're not related, but obviously, list making runs in the Rizzo line or
Mhm.
something, because she's a big list maker too. And she wrote a book about, it was her memoir through lists.
Oh,
So it was
wow.
her lists for her whole life that she had kept, and you could see where she was in the different phases of her life
Oh,
depending on what was on her list, which is really fun. And the thing that kept popping up again and again was learn Italian. And so when I interviewed her, I said, so did you learn Italian? Did you do it? It kept popping up. It was on the last list. She said, no, I never learned it. I never did it because I didn't care enough. It wasn't a priority for me. It was one of those things that I would see on the list and I would really get bummed out every time it was there. I would feel bad for myself. I would feel guilty. And I finally said, you know what? This is never going to happen. And that's okay. And I
Mm.
think it's just permission to be able to say, this is pressure I'm putting on myself for no good reason.
Yeah.
What will change? It's totally fine. So I think sometimes we need to look at the things that we're putting on ourselves, because it is pressure that we put on ourselves.
Is my God. And so that's exactly what kind of came up for me thinking about. That's why your subtitles jumped out at me so much about less stress, because I am such an overachiever and I want to do all the things, and I make the lists, and the lists multiply like little, when you feed the gremlins after midnight or something,
Yes.
start multiplying. That's like
Right.
lists, and it can get carried away. And I have had both experiences. One where like there is something I keep putting on again and again, not doing. And then I'm like, wait, maybe I don't actually want to do this. And that's why I'm not doing it. I've also had instances where it's like, you know what, if I keep saying I'm going to do this, like I'm signing up and I'm doing the damn thing. And I've been on both sides of that. And that's, it's not right or wrong. It's really just asking yourself, well, why do I keep adding this? Is it a should? Is it a self-imposed, or is it like something, that I think I'm supposed to want? So yeah, that's really interesting. And it is true, like we can get ourselves really carried away. So what are some of like the keys to having list making be something that reduces stress versus adding, like in terms of
Yes.
in practical advice?
Yeah, right. You don't want it to be where you have lists everywhere and you're, freaking out over things. Like, I think it is very important to have a system. And a lot of times people will ask me, oh, what's the best notebook to use? What's the best pen? What's the best app? The truth is, it doesn't really matter. And people hate that answer because what you have to do is you have to try it out for yourself.
Yeah.
You have to see what works best for you. So if your system is a Post-it note, and I have a lot of friends who just use the Post-it note and they write, it's a small space. So it's like they can put 4 or 5 things on it and that's all they're doing for the day. So they're very intentional about that list. If that works for you, then terrific. I also suggest for people to make sure that you have 2 separate lists for home and for work.
Okay.
It could even be on the same page, but just make sure that they're separated so that your mind doesn't have to figure out, what am I looking at? What do I, make it easy to just glance and say, okay, this is the next thing I need to do.
Got it.
Another thing too is to really know yourself and I call it tap into your productivity style. So if you're not a morning person, I'm never going to tell you to become a morning person. I think it's ridiculous. There's a lot of productivity experts out there who say, oh, you have to get things done at 4:00 in the morning. It's just going to make you cranky. And I know because I've tried it. I've tried to be a morning person and I'm just not. I've designed my life and my day around how I work best. And so for me, especially, I don't like to just jump out of bed and start working and start doing stuff. I like to slowly start my day. And I really don't start working with clients until around 11:30, even though I get up, and I'm reading the newspaper and I'm drinking my tea and I'm kind of having a leisurely morning. For me, that makes me happy and more productive because then I can get to all the other stuff I need to do a little bit later in the day and I feel good about it. So that works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but you got to check in with yourself and see what feels best.
Totally. That makes so much sense. Yeah. And, the more we learn and the more we read, the more I read about sleep, the more evident it is that if you're robbing yourself of sleep, it's not setting you up for any kind of success in the long term. And some people are morning people, and that's great. And, I've been told, like, if you get up a little earlier each day, you will naturally fall asleep a little earlier each day. But I agree with you. I think some of us are wired for being morning people and some of us aren't. And there's no reason to force what works for someone else. And you raised such a good point about like it doesn't necessarily matter the app or if it's on your phone or electronic or if it's on paper, like as long as you have a system and you're sticking to it. If you have like 50,000 different systems, I would think that would be a problem because then you're not even keeping track of those lists.
Right. And, if you have one, I would suggest having one notebook where you keep all your lists as opposed to, people will put them on the back of receipts or they'll put them on, envelopes or wherever. Have one place that you're keeping those lists. And, the other thing too about working either in the morning or in the evening, tap in and see how do you feel when you're working during those times. Are you more creative versus, should you be replying to emails during that time? That's a big thing too. Knowing, some people are more creative at night or more creative in the morning, and then maybe you'll do your writing then. So just, try to design your day around that so that you're able to tap into your best productivity, mindset. And then that way you'll get stuff done and it won't feel like work.
Hey, it's Andrea again. Can I help give you the courage to own your life? Want to redirect your time towards the goals and experiences that really matter? Get your copy of my book, Own It All, on Amazon. Part manifesto, workbook, and expert interview collection. Then, let's connect on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter and continue the conversation. Find out more at AndreaIsabelLucas.com.
It reminds me, like when you're talking about making these short lists, right, where you're not like making these exhaustive lists, like I have a habit of doing both. Like I make really exhaustive lists. Like I have a list of like every freaking doorknob in my house that I want to like change out and put a cooler thing or, whatever. When you own a house, there's always a million
Of
things that you want to
course.
change. Right. And Catherine North, one of the people who was in my book and who's a life coach, and she does this program called the Queen Sweep every year. And she has you focus on like, I think it's 3, but like maybe as many as 5, but I want to say it's like 3 areas that you're going to make more beautiful. And it's just like, where do your eyes land most frequently in your day? What are those 3 areas? Maybe it's your desk, your car, and like your nightstand. And she has you like just clean and beautify those areas. It's like the best advice ever because you're going to get the most out of that as opposed to like every nook and cranny of every possible thing you could ever do.
Exactly. Or you kind of procrastinate because you're like, oh, I'll start over there. And then you're not actually getting stuff that really matters done. It reminds me, there's a woman who I interviewed in my first book. Her name is Tracy McCubbin. And she's a professional organizer. She has a brand new book out as well. And what she always tells people when she's helping them clear clutter is, where do you get stopped up the most? Where is that? That's where we start. If it's in the kitchen and you're going through 12 different spatulas that you have in this one drawer, that's the drawer we start with, So it's not really like, okay, let's start over here because that looks, less scary. It really is what's going to serve you best.
For me, that's my office. I'm like, oh God, I have to do something in my office. I need to get a more comfortable, like more ergonomic chair. And the floor is really slanted. So I need to figure out how to make the chair not feel like it's like leaning so far, because I will like avoid my office and I will go, my house was built in 1880. So there's like a lot of quirks, but I will go to the coffee shop a lot, but then you go to the coffee shop and then like the Wi-Fi is not working. There's just like a million.
Right, you're not doing. Yeah. True. That's the thing. It's, and that's part of the book too, is really identifying where you want to work. What do you want to look at? What is the best, are you listening to music? Are you watching TV? Or like, what do you have? My background is working in a TV newsroom, which is really, really busy. There's constantly people talking. There's always something going on. You're always drowning out noise, whether it's you have headphones on or whatever, and you're trying to get through your work. And then when I wrote my first book, I was in my apartment by myself in the total dead quiet. And I was like, I can't do anything in here. I had to put the TV on, or I had to go to a cafe or something where there were people, because that's how I had learned how to work. So, you have to really tap into what will make you work best.
Amazing. So you mentioned doing a bucket list as one of your like highest recommended lists for people to make. I would love to delve a little more into what you're talking about making lists of feelings. Are these feelings that we want to have? Are they the feelings that we do have to start to observe how our day is affecting us? Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah. So in the book, there's an exercise where I asked you to journal out when you were the most stressed out in the past, like 3 months or something. Right. And so you just free write, think about what was that moment, just write that scene, and you write that scene and you give yourself some time to do it. And then afterwards, I encourage you to write a list of words, like what comes up for you. What were those feelings that you were feeling during that stressful time, And so then to be able to kind of remove yourself and look at that list and identify, okay, this is what's happening for me, on a regular basis, or when I'm around this person, because then you have to kind of connect the dots. What was another time you were stressed out? Okay, what's the same about these things?
Right.
We think that we'll know, and we don't. You sometimes have to observe. You have to observe your life like a journalist and say, okay, you know what? Like this is not working for me. I need to make sure that I'm not, getting up at 8:00 in the morning and then starting talking to people at 9 a.m. because I'm cranky and I'm actually not ready. You know what I mean? That's stressing me out. I want to make sure I have everything else done first, and then I can sit down and focus on other people. So it just depends, what you get out of it. But I think writing those lists of words, and really it's easier than writing a whole book or a whole long thing, to just identify a couple of feelings.
It sounds so simple, but it's like, I'm sitting here asking myself if I've ever really done that. I think I've kind of toyed with the concept of like core desired feelings and how do I want to feel and like what could make me feel that way. When you were just talking, I was thinking, shoot, in my Google Calendar, after I do a thing, I could just change the event after and just make a note in it that says like how I felt while that was happening. Or
yes. And that is what I pulled all this from the book, from, being out as an entrepreneur on my own. I've been, out on my own about almost 2 years. And after the first year, I said, I need to do an audit. I need to see what worked, what didn't work. How do I want to design my day better? And what I did was everything I did, every speaking engagement I did, every time I worked with clients, all different kinds of stuff, I stopped and I listed out how did that make me feel?
Wow.
Did I like it? Did I enjoy it? Is that something that makes me excited or did I dread it? Okay, I'm not going to do that again next year. Right? It sounds simple, but it's just like you have to like stop yourself because you get so into the momentum of the doing and the saying yes and the wanting and all of that, that it doesn't allow you to really do what you want to do.
Mm.
Even with my schedule, I had calls back to back to back to back. I hate doing that.
Totally.
It makes me so anxious.
Totally.
And then I don't eat lunch and then I'm cranky and then I don't have enough time in between calls if I have to like finish up something or get ready for the next call. So now I have it designed where it's pretty, paced out pretty well. And you have to remind yourself, look, this is something that you don't have to open your calendar to everybody at all times. It's okay to only have 3 or 4 time slots that people can talk to you. And then if it doesn't work, you'll talk to them tomorrow,
Mm-hmm. I've started to shift how I think about my workouts. And I know like people just make assumptions that because I'm in the fitness business, all I want to do is work out. Like I do love exercising. I love how I feel when I exercise, like the way most people do. And I will sometimes dread doing it and try to come up with excuses not to. And I'll get hung up on what I'm doing. And then I don't want to stop to go do my scheduled workout or whatever. Like, I'm just like everyone. Like I have a hard time working out at home. Like I have weights here, there's stuff I can do, but I probably won't. If I have any kind of accountability to like show up at a group fitness situation, it's a lot better for me to have that accountability and to do it that way. But it's interesting because I noticed that a lot of times I was adding those items to my calendar out of a feeling of should. And especially like as a fitness business owner, I really should be working out like at least, this many times a week. And only very recently, and I'm talking like over the summer, I've been noticing like, actually, the only reason like that I shouldn't cancel on myself when I schedule a workout is because I definitively feel so much better. So now instead of like, oh, well, I was going to go to this like 6:00 class tonight and I really should, it's more of just like, I better not bail on myself because I know how it's going to make me feel. Not because I have to be a certain level of like fitness and, because
I have to feel better. Totally. I have to make sure I feel good. Yeah.
Take care of my mental health, my physical health, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a friend of mine, his name is Peter Shankman, and he actually works out first thing in the morning, like 4 a.m. or it's like he gets up crazy early, which is nuts, but it works for him. And he has ADHD and he's written a lot about it. He has a podcast about it. And he said that for him to be able to get his adrenaline pumping and moving early in the morning like that, and to, get a dopamine hit or whatever it is, it really helps him for the rest of the day to be less all over the place. So he's like, it's like taking medicine in the morning. Do I want to get up at that time? Probably not. But I know the rest of the day is going to go a hell of a lot better if I do it.
That's
so
great.
Knowing that about yourself really, can help you set yourself up for success.
Absolutely. Another thing that I thought of when you were talking about making lists and just, there's something very simple about making a list. It's not like making a whole project management system, and it's not like it has to have all these different subcategories and tasks and everything. Like a list is simple. I have this app on my phone called Winstreak, and literally it's just a list making app, and every day at the end of the day the idea is you write down your wins for the day, and it might be I had a salad or I like drove past the fast food place when I was about to stop and I like came home and made myself some food, or like I did my regularly scheduled workout, or I went for like a 1 mile jog or whatever. It could be the smallest thing, or like I finally sent that email to pitch myself to whatever. But it's so great because at the end of each week, I do like a roundup of those and I kind of scan them and I record them and share with my team, like when we have our weekly calls. And then at the end of each quarter, I look back and I'm like, oh my God, so much was accomplished that I wouldn't have taken credit for.
It's so true. You just have to like give yourself the space to look at it, I mean, I'm known for if I do something and it wasn't on the list, I'll put it on the list so that I can cross it out.
Totally. Same.
Well, I did it. I want to get credit for it,
Yes.
But there is really important about that, done list. I did all of these things. Like I was actually very productive in those days when you think like, oh, I didn't get this done. I didn't get that done. Well, look at all the other things you did.
What do you advise people to do when the things on their list are making them feel crappy?
Well, you do have to examine that and see why. Is it something that really just needs to be there or not? And then is it something you can give to somebody else to do? And so often, I'm a big fan of outsourcing.
Mm-hmm.
And so really figuring out, do you have to be the one to do it? So if it's, let's say, media, TV interview or something, you have to be the one to do it.
Yeah.
You have to be. But, writing an article, it doesn't have to be you.
Mm-hmm.
You could create a video and say, hey, this is what I want to say. I think this, and this about that. And I'm sure there's a fact about that out there. And if you could research that, that'd be great. And then you hand it off to a VA or you hand it off to a writer or whatever, and they can do that part for you. So,
right.
To really take it, it's a lot of ego though. We think it has to be me. I have to be the one. It doesn't. I know this from years of being a producer where I wrote all the words the anchors said. They didn't, for the most part, they didn't write their own scripts. We were ghostwriters. We did the work for them. They did the interviews, they did some research, that kind of thing. But, it really takes the ego out of it a little bit to say, you know what, I still need to get this done and I'm in the way. Mm-hmm. If I keep saying I'm going to do it, it's just never going to happen.
So I'm curious, do you have suggestions, like recommendations, anything around self-care? It's such a buzzword right now. And I think, I would just love to hear your take on like, what does self-care mean to you and how does that factor in with the work that you do?
Sure. As a journalist, I've done a lot of stories on self-care and how important it is and how good it is for you. And it is really something that you should prioritize. But I think what people get wrong about it is that they think it has to be a big ordeal. They think, oh, it has to be a week-long vacation or a 2-hour massage. It doesn't have to be. It can be, small things that you do for yourself throughout the day that really recharge you. It could be sipping a cup of your favorite tea, talking to your friend, maybe, you carve out some time to listen to music that you really love, or give yourself an extra day after you get back from a vacation. I love that one. I try to do that as much as possible because I find that it's not super, I guess it's indulgent to put another extra day on your calendar that you're not doing anything, but it also helps me to be less stressed out. I find that if I give myself that buffer, it's much easier to get back into the flow of things and feel really recharged. So you have to kind of tap in and see what it is that you really, value. And, for you, it might not be drinking tea. I love tea. So maybe that's, it's my thing. But to really make a list, and that's in the book too, make a list of the things that you really love to do that you can incorporate into your day. Maybe it's going to yoga. Maybe it's, working out for 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be over the top.
That's great. And do you take the things from your list and put them directly into your calendar, or do you just let the list kind of run your day?
I do a little bit of both, but I do like to incorporate it into the calendar because I find that if I don't stick it in the calendar, it's not that I don't know what to do, but then there's too many choices.
Yes. Oh, that's huge.
So I have a virtual assistant that I work with. And so I'll tell her, hey, if I really need to do something, just put it on the calendar. So it almost like tricks me that I'm like, oh, this is what the appointment is right now. I have to write that article, so that I know that I have to go do it. So for me, that triggers me into action. So I would say try a little bit of both.
That's great advice. Thank you. So in addition to writing about list making and really how to use that sounds like to improve your life, not just to get more done, but really to like have a better quality of life. You coach people and train them on how to be better on camera and how to get themselves in front of various different media outlets, which I think, is of course highly useful for entrepreneurs, but I think there's a lot of reasons why people might want to, whether that's something involving local politics or some nonprofit that they're involved with, or just some project that they want to generate more support for. What are some of the ways that you help people in that field?
Yeah. So I do work one-on-one with people. I work in group programs. And I always start really with the first thing, like, how can you be of service? And it's very different when you're thinking about, especially for business owners or for authors, we're thinking, okay, well, I want to get more clients or I want to sell more books or whatever it is. The media doesn't care about that. They don't want to be your pitch man. Right. They don't want to be there to help you sell books. They could care less. What they want is a really great story that's going to change their audience and their lives. Okay. So if you put on the, how can I be of service hat and say, okay, I know all these things. Here's the ways that I help my clients. I know all of these different tools, to help people be less stressed out or whatever, if we take list making.
Yeah.
Here's a way that I can kind of, help people be more productive in their day, set their day up for success. Of course, do I want to sell books at the end of the day? 100%, but I lead with service. And I think that that's the piece that people miss when they pitch media. They make it all about themselves as opposed to the audience. So you have to be thinking of who the audience is and know what they would want. So you have to watch the show, or you have to read the magazine or listen to the podcast. Always know who that audience is.
Any final thoughts that you want to leave everybody with in terms of if you could be of service to the listeners today, like what are the, one or two things that if they take nothing else away from this podcast, what do you want them to have heard?
Yeah, I think one is just stop being so hard on yourself. I think we put the most stress on ourselves and we think, oh, it has to happen. And all of these things, I have to get them done and all of that. But, if nothing else from my appendix bursting in very dramatic fashion, I learned, what? The world still worked. Things still happened. People were still, still doing what they needed to do. All those segments that I had set up at the time at Fox, they still happened. Somebody else did them. It wasn't me, but it still happened. So, life will go on. And I think that you just need to sometimes pull your ego out of it a little bit to say, let's just see if I did less this week, do I actually get more done? And when you start experimenting with that, I think you'll be really surprised and actually really delighted.
Thank you so much. How can everybody continue to follow along with you and to keep in touch with you?
Sure. So you can find out about the book at listfulliving.com. And then to follow me for media training and coaching, you can find me at paularizzo.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm Andrea Isabel Lucas. Thanks for listening to the Own It All podcast, made with love and gratitude from Boston. If you liked what you heard, subscribe, rate, and review on your app. Then, connect with me on social media for more helpful tips and techniques. I'd love to talk with you there. Or maybe I can motivate your team at a conference, retreat, or special event. I'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. See you then.